Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, your creativity and spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations will speak to your spirituality, your sensuality and your soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. Before going into this episode, I just want to highlight a save the date reminder. On Tuesday, the 10th of September is September's Creative Confidence Masterclass. Tuesday, the 10th of September at 7 p.m. UK time. And this month, I'm focusing on the spirituality of creativity. And with this, you'll recognize yourself as a spiritual being and then confidently integrate creativity into all aspects of your life. The link to join is in the show notes below. And also, if you haven't yet, tune into the sister podcast, Her Inspirations, where in each episode I explore with you a different aspect of our spirituality and creative journeys. My guest this week is coach and mentor Nik Chung. She combines strategic steps with personal and spiritual development to help leaders create positive, empowering spaces for themselves and the people they influence. During our conversation, Nik shares how her experience of working professionally within many sectors of the corporate world and within spirituality has ignited her mission to awaken leaders ready to expand themselves and change the landscape of their business, workplace, all on the foundation of deep spiritual practice. So as always, I begin by asking my guest, HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel that higher energetic resonance?
When do I feel a higher energetic resonance? I was thinking about this and I was thinking about what it means to have higher energetic resonance. And I kind of thought about higher energy. And for me, that is a energy that's based beyond my thoughts and my mind and beyond my identity or my ego. And it's like a source energy that exists within me and within everything. So it's a connection energy. It's an energy that resides in everything that is here on the earth. And so when I think about resonating with that, like being the match for that or connecting to that higher energy, like what are the states that I get that when am I in that state? And the first thing that came to mind was when my mind is quiet. When my mind is quiet. And to some extent when my body's quiet too, and I mean like in a calm state, not in a stressed state. So the things that tend to get me in that higher energy resonance is meditation, being out in nature, connecting in the bush or in the surf. And I also feel it when I'm really inspired and I'm taking inspired action. I feel like my body just becomes a channel of that energy, right? So it's like the energy uses my body to enact itself in the physical world. So when do I feel the higher energetic resonance? I think when I'm firstly have that quiet mind, and then through things like meditation, nature, and inspired action.
Perfect. Beautiful answer. Thank you so much. And before we go further into our conversation, Nik, can I give you the opportunity to just share about who you are, your journey, and how you've got to the point that you are now and doing the work that you're doing for us?
So I guess I'll start at the very beginning and try to make it short. I've always been interested since a little kid of the big questions of why we're here and what's our purpose on this earth. And I've always had an interest in the development of people and how people think, what are their motivations. And from that has stemmed a lifelong passion of helping people. So when I first started at university, I went to university and I got a degree in psychology and physical education, both of which was to help me to understand the mind and the body, mental and physical health better. And And then I realized with my short stint in professional work for about 5 or 6 years in the corporate world, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. This feels
Mm.
rather strangling and like not, it's not allowing me to make the changes I thought I was going to do in the world. I originally worked in governmental departments, so I thought that that position would allow me to create really big change. But what I experienced was the bureaucracy often stopped real change from happening. I witnessed a lot of wasting of money,
Mm.
which really still really riles me up. The amount of money and resources that are wasted, which doesn't actually go to things that actually create change in the world. And so I left that traditional workplace. And then you might say that I had kind of like a spiritual awakening, as some people would call it. And I
Mm.
started to explore all of these different ways of being healthy, of being a healthy person. And this took me into more of the woo-woo spiritual practices. I looked at conscious dance and movement. I was a teacher in that for a while. I did energy healing, body work. And then I kind of went just on a deep dive into personal and spiritual development and how I could be a better person myself. And then the coaching and mentoring part, which is where I am right now, really fell into my lap. And it was, as most things have been in my life, it's been like, Nick, you should do this. And it's
Mm.
been a combination of spirit, which I now know talks to me directly and goes, hey, you should do this by tapping me, or getting other people to be their messenger, right?
Mm.
So with the coaching thing, I remember just several people saying to me, maybe you should consider being a coach. Maybe you should consider doing that. And I hadn't really taken it seriously. But for the past 10 years, that's what I've been. I've been a coach and mentor in the spiritual and personal development space. And in the past 5 years, looking at how to combine that with small businesses. So really looking at how can I be a good person through the business I do, and also create strategies and systems that are in alignment to who it is that I want to be, i.e. a person who creates positive change. So in every action, I believe that we can make changes that have these ripple effects that create positivity through the world.
Mhm.
And now I'm switching tact again, another tap on the shoulder, and I'm switching tact and looking at working with conscious leaders, leaders in in the corporate workspace, the place I left because I didn't love the environment. I'm
Mm.
looking at those leaders and going, who's putting their hand up to want to put more humanizing practices back into the workplace?
Mm.
And really, that was a shoulder tap I got right at the start of my spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
remember coming out and going, the joy I feel from having, discovered all these things about myself, everyone should have access to this. I'm going to be the person who brings this down to like the common person. And then I kind of forgot about it and I started working with the people who already know that, right? So when I was
Mm.
being a coach for small businesses, it was really with those people who were already in the spiritual space. Um, and I realized that I was preaching to the converted, and the people who I believe more of us who are inclined to this work need to work with are those who maybe don't have access to, or have no interest, or don't have time
Mm.
or motivation to explore the power of personal and spiritual development and how much joy that can bring and how much enrichment in life it can bring. And so,
Mm.
therefore, I was like, who can affect those people? Leaders,
Mm.
corporate leaders who have 40 hours a week to hang out with these people and who can influence them by being more of that person who wants to create positive change in the world. So
Yeah.
that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Right. And what a beautiful mission that is. Because I when we spoke before as well, we had a very similar, we were kind of like juicing off the whole idea of like this is what really needs to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, when you're going through your own personal spiritual journey, then of course you get surrounded by other people who are on a similar path to you anyway. They kind of feel like the outliers of society, the black sheep of the family. And
Yep.
so we kind of like congregate around each other and just kind of speak our language to each other all the time. And it is just, we're like talking to each other. It's like it's like an echo chamber of the same stuff. And even
Yes.
though we can serve within that arena, there comes a point where I think if you want to grow, you desire a challenge, or you
Mm,
desire something new, or you want to feel how can you expand.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes as well, like truth be told, those spiritual communities can become a little bit toxic in themselves as well. So,
Ab-
they're not perfect at all, but
yes.
they are sometimes a necessary arena to explore, especially when you're coming out of what we might call a real world experience and going into this spiritually open experience as well. But it has its issues. It has
Mm,
many issues, and it's kind of working its way through those issues as things always do. But then, like you
yeah.
say, then looking back and going, well, who can I really make the transformation with? And sometimes working with, I don't know if you found this, working with people who are spiritually aware, um, sometimes I meet up against a buffer of people who've read a lot of books, followed a lot of people, know a lot of language, and hide behind the language and the quotes without doing the
Absolutely.
work.
Absolutely.
So
For
so they're
sure.
not, yeah, so they're kind of stuck in this, yeah, I know it, yeah, I've heard that before, yeah, it's like, and not doing anything about it. And
Yes.
sometimes as well, and I used to find this, especially when I was doing a lot of freelancing. So my first foray into like getting away from like the 9 to 5 structure was freelancing and doing websites and just online presence stuff as well, like back in the day when not many people did it.
Mm,
And I realized that my niche area was to work with people within the spiritual community because I understood the tech stuff, so I could do my brain, but also I understood the woo-woo, so I could kind of
yes.
translate the woo-woo into, real stuff.
Yeah.
But there'd be times where I'd buck up against a little bit of frustration, when I'd be like, okay, what font do you want? What color do you need? And then you want to go off and like wait for the universe to tell you. And I'm like, we've got a deadline. And I get it, but sometimes like you can hide behind the woo, the language, the
Mm,
terminology to mask your indecision. Like sometimes
absolutely.
a lot of the time it was you haven't made a decision on
Hmm.
something, you don't know which way to go. And instead of just being honest so that we can sit down and have the conversation about why you're having overwhelm about reasons why you can't go forward, you're blaming
Mm,
the universe.
mm,
And using those words to do so. And I think sometimes it's that level of uncertainty and clarity and kind of like, I'm just going to float with the breeze as and when, that puts people off in the corporate world because they'll look and usually it's the wishy-washy and people can get
yes.
triggered, but I'm just going to use this because those who can hear it. It's the
Absolutely.
wishy-washy floaters who are not making decisions and kind of relying on things that are not tangible that
Mm,
put off corporate-minded people who need tangible things and physical
e-
things and things to happen. And it's like, well,
exactly.
yeah, and you know what I mean? And there's this kind of disconnect between the two. Whereas if you can look at that side and then go, but if you then utilize what needs to happen to move things forward, you can see how that can actually accelerate it. But how to then reach back into corporate minded people and explain to them that the woo works. It's just some of the loudest woo sometimes is not necessarily representative of everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I completely hear you. Like I think we're very similar in that we both have very strategic minds, as well as like having our foot in the spiritual door.
Mm,
Not even in the door. We've been in the room. We've been in the room for a long time in there. And
mhm.
so I've had similar experiences from what you're talking about getting frustrated with the lack of shall I say, not intention, but commitment, maybe dedication to
Right.
what it is that you want to create in the world.
Mm,
There is a masculine nature to that, of which leadership is genuinely, like generally is. It's that kind of masculine taking action, taking the lead of something that needs to happen, whether you're a business owner in the spiritual space or not. And I think, as you said, there are a lot of on the woo-woo side where the floating people that don't represent all of us who are interested in spirituality. I came across this really amazing paper actually about spirituality in the workplace,
mhm.
and it's just been recently published. I can't quote the people, but maybe we can put it in the notes when I find the writers
Sure.
of this this published work, but they were quoting about up to 80-something% of people in the corporate space consider themselves spiritual. Isn't that crazy? So even though we're like, oh, there's this like weird disconnect between corporate spaces or your traditional workplaces with spirituality, up to 80% of people consider themselves spiritual. Now, spiritual is a huge umbrella term to use.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that, spiritual doesn't need to look like the floaty person wearing white linen and not making decisions. It can be like you and I we're very, decision driven, maybe goal driven women who want to make a huge change in the world. And I actually think we need this balance. We need this balance of directness, of having and striving for goals. Maybe not striving is the right word, but you know what I mean, like putting in place goals and creating with intention and taking action with intention to actually create huge change in the world. I do believe in timing. I do believe in divine intervention. I do believe in all of those things coming to play as well. But I also am looking at what manifests in the physical world and who it is that we have as leaders. These people tend to have really clear visions of what they want to create in the world, and they take action.
Right.
So I'm kind of doing a little shout out to like the spiritual people who are listening to us right now. Yes, you can follow the tugs and you can follow the soul tugs, and I opt for that completely. Like I've used that for my life to navigate all of the steps that I've taken. But also look at how big a picture, how much impact do you actually want to make in the world? And are you willing to come up with a goal, set your mind to it, and take soul-led steps or inspired steps all the time until you get there? Because who is actually at the top of the ladders right now if we look just on the global scale of leadership? These are people who are driven to a certain goal. And so if we want to make, say, spirituality more accessible or more talked about or more, where people are experiencing this kind of joy that you get when you are really feeling like you're in touch with some kind of higher energy resonance, as we started with, then we have to have people in the spiritual community who are willing to kind of take cues from those leaders who aren't in the spiritual community, but who are big influences in the world. We have to start taking some of those cues, because that's what we're working within. We're working within a physical world that is in this current reality, that is operating within these current systems. Once we can get past those systems, we can change them, right? It's like if we sit back and we just talk about all the stuff, like we do, like sometimes we do in these spiritual spaces, we just talk about all the things and nothing gets done. Guess what? Nothing gets done.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
I'm really attracted to working with corporates, and especially in the leadership area, because these people are driven. They're driven to create things. And if they have any inkling to create in the positive, that is create empowering spaces for their people, I know they're going to get shit done. They're going to get it done. Why? Because they know how to create in a physical space, and all they need now is the spiritual and personal development to help them to do that in a way that is empowering for themselves and for others.
Yeah, 100%. And I think and sometimes when I've had these conversations about, well, and even sometimes talking about the goals that I've got for what I'm creating and what I see in my mind for it, and even sometimes talking about it in a kind of monetary way and going like, these are these are the kind of goals that I have for myself, and this is what it looks like on a physical monetary level. This is what I want to create over the next X amount of time. Even that can pull, like, no, I just want to be sackcloth and ashes, and like, well, that's not going to work for me, actually.
Yeah.
Because and why do we keep adopting this idea that righteousness comes with a vow of poverty, and then then it causes that contraction. Then you go into this kind of desperation phase where suddenly now you've got obligations to meet, real world obligations to meet. Then you're going out into the community, wherever, trying to like bring in like a new client or set up a new thing, but it comes with this kind of energy of like, I've got bills to pay, you know, and like the heart centeredness of it disappears, because then there becomes this kind of grasping energy, because you're going out there because you need to create this, because you need to bring something in, and then it kind of gives everything this you know, this kind of bad taste, and people have a bad experience. And like with, you know, whether we're talking about very like corporate spaces or whether we're talking about more spiritual spaces, I've got stories of bad experiences in both, you know, so neither is better than the other, you know, so it's not, you know, the way that people approach things. Because sometimes there's, from the point of view of looking from a corporate point of view, we can say, oh, it's just all about greed. Yeah. You know, because like you make more, you make more, you make more. But then from the spiritual side of things, then it's like you wait until you're kind of running as zero or even minus. And then it comes from a point of like desperation and lack. You know, neither of those energies you know what I mean? Neither of those energies are going to help us. We're not opening ourselves up for anybody to have a good experience within it. So yeah, I think it's finding the balance between the two. So the two are, you know, and congruent and at the best point within themselves. And then maybe this kind of connection can start to, you know, we can see that we ultimately both want the same thing. We just kind of need to be open to each other, and understand the benefits that both side, I hate to say sides, but you know, it's kind of split like that for now. But then recognize that there are benefits to the way that somebody who's driven and has a goal and has a vision for something goes about getting things done on a day-to-day basis, but then how sometimes if you have the goals, that you keep taking steps forward, but you have the flexibility to hear the whispers, or if you need to pivot, or, you know, those parts that sometimes that's where I feel that that looking at the corporate side of things can be a little bit stifled and doesn't allow the divine to move through it enough.
Absolutely.
You know, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's so much, you know, we can talk about, say, for example, let's coming back to this idea of money. Like we've got so many tools or strategies that can either be used in good or bad, right? So they're just tools or strategies. That's the thing. In any way, which way you want to cut it, everything is just a tool or strategy. It's neither good nor bad. It just depends on how you're using that thing. So when we talk about money, we can use it for greed. We can do it from the intention of greed, or we can do it with the intention of abundance and wanting to spread that abundance. That's my personal goal. My personal mission in the world is that my business will become so wealthy that when I leave this planet, I can leave a legacy that is money making, that can help create more abundance in the world after I leave. Right? That's the reason I want to accumulate wealth. So it's not about the particular strategy. Like we could say goal, for a while there in the spiritual space, there was a lot about not making goals, you know, letting the divine just take you. And as I said, I did soul-led business as my business for 5 years. So I very much am an advocate for following the soul tugs. But as I said before, it's just a strategy. So whatever strategy lights you up, we all work in different ways. Some people are goal-driven. At the moment, those who lead are goal-driven. They're the ones who are making the impact. They're the ones that I'm interested in working with because I'm a goal-driven person, right? And we get to decide when a goal becomes stifling, as you said, and becomes inflexible. We could talk about it in terms of masculine and feminine. That's the disempowered masculine coming forward, having to control everything, which causes contraction, which means that we don't have any more flexibility, which means that we start to shrink, and we start to just follow a path because we think we have to. We start having ourselves stifled by obligation. Or we can have goals, as you said, that are flexible, that we have the grand vision and we have steps that we take to that, but we follow the joy path. The joy path looks very different from what the ego decides it's going to look like. The ego, remember, is always like, I want to have certainty in my life. So I'm going to create steps for you. And I know personally my ego is really good at that. It's like we just have to do X, Y, and Z and we'll get there, you know. But life is life. And when you lead a spiritual life, you know that things don't always go to plan. And I think this is where, like, you're talking about the meeting of the worlds. This is something that any goal-driven person can really learn, is these spiritual lessons that we have learned about letting go, surrendering, detaching from what it is that we want to create, detaching from our ego's way of thinking that how we're going to do something. We can still keep the faith of where we're going. We can still head in the right direction. We still take inspired action towards that. It's just that the way that you're going to get there might have to change.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to use the tools as much as they empower us, and we get to drop the tools or strategies when they start to not feel good for us anymore. And this is where we can meet between like the corporate world and the spiritual world, because both of them, like one works very much in the physical world at this point in time, and the other works very much with the energy. And that higher calling or mission or inspiration that pushes you. And both of them, if you can get those two working in balance with each other, I think there's just something really magical that can be created in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I mean, like, it's one of the things that I'm really keen to find for myself. No, even before I kind of bring it and speak about it to other people, it's like, how can I be straddling both so that I remain who I want to be, so that I look at the things that I'm doing and I'm happy about what I'm creating from a personal point of view. Like I can, I can still see that I haven't lost myself, because it's very easy to go like too far in either direction and adopt a persona, because there's a there's a persona type, that so that I don't kind of lose myself by going too far off into the weeds and not making decisions, or getting too deep in a practice and then forgetting to do the things that need to be done in a physical way, in the physical world, in a very measured way, and having dates and times and things that need to be met. But then also that I don't go so far into the meeting of the dotting the T's and dotting the T's, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and not forgetting that sometimes maybe we do need to like dot a T. Maybe there's a different way of doing something. So, the slip there actually brought something to me. So like that maybe even though there is a structure, there has been a structure, there's things have always been done this way, that maybe by coming in and going, I appreciate the way that things have been done, but I'm feeling that there is a new possibility that can be brought in, and for to be able to follow along the lines of that kind of new vision within, and also be able to stand up to the fear around other people that feel something is breaking down or having to be broken down. That's when I'm kind of like figuring out like, where am I going with things, and like, why do I feel that I need to just keep showing up in a space where I'm like, I know that most people don't really hear what I'm saying yet, but for some reason I keep getting nudged into the room, just like stand in the room and talk about your stuff, like that's
completely. I get it. Yeah. I'm finding that more like, when I made the decision to come back to that soul decision that said, you're going to take spirituality to the common people. Remember that? Like when I made the decision last year, I was like, suddenly I was confronted with meeting people from traditional workplaces. They suddenly came back into my life, and having to even explain what I did was a step in that, like you said, being suddenly shoved into the room, and learning how to communicate it in such a way that people weren't turned off by it, but were genuinely curious with it. Right. I think at the moment, we're in this really special space where I feel like spirituality has become more mainstream through many practices. Like, there's a yoga studio, like 4 yoga studios, within walking distance of most cities. It's everywhere. And so I think right now is a really awesome time for those of us who wish to make impact outside of the spiritual community, we want to work with people who are maybe less inclined to that, it's a perfect time to get in there and to be doing that. And of course, we have to, very marketing speak, but we have to be able to talk the talk as well, right? We have to be able to talk in a way that is going to resonate with the people that we want to work with in corporate spaces or traditional workplaces. But I feel like the tide is turning. This is the time for when we get to marry these two things together and make the world a really awesome place. It doesn't have to be an exclusive club. We talk about spirituality and all the communities. It feels kind of exclusive, especially when you get more into it and we have all our own lingo and we speak about all the same stuff. And then, someone from the outside comes in. This is like my partner, right? He comes into like a spiritual community and he's like, what the are you talking about? He's like, oh my gosh. And, he went to a Steiner school, so he's a little bit anti-hippie. He kind of went the 180 of Steiner. So I feel for him, because we have our own lingo. We have, it's a cool person's club. And I never was part of that when I was a kid, so I can understand when people don't want to embrace the ideas that could really help humanity. A lot of the, if we come down to all of the core spiritual principles, one of which is like kindness, compassion, those basic things. Everyone wants that in their life. But we need to kind of maybe take away some of the stigma, as we talked about, and the exclusivity of what it means to be spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because last week or one of the weeks anyway on my solo episode as well, I was kind of talking about stuff like that, but about creating your own spiritual philosophy, that it doesn't have to go into any one modality, because over the years, I came from religion, so that in itself, and then
Me too.
and then went into all of these different kind of spiritual groups, different modalities, did the courses, got involved in different groups for like a few years here and a few years there, until again they started to feel it, or some of them turned out to be a bit more cultish, so there's all of that, so
done that.
Exactly. So if you're really spiritual, if you've not joined a cult, have you
exactly.
And I realized there's a couple of people over the course of it, like, oh gosh, yeah, okay, like I was part of his stuff, paid for his things for a few years, and then now there was another one as well. I'm like, what is it about me that I keep getting drawn into these kind of culty things? Or maybe my soul is just going in order for you to have a sense of humor about it down the line, and to have the lived experience, we're just going to shove you in a cult for a couple of years so that you can see what it looks like from the inside out, and then when you realize that what's going on, leave, literally leave, don't hang around, don't defend it, go, so it was just about, developing your own spiritual philosophy, and taking from all of the practices that you may have learned over the years and creating something that's yours and works for you, and not feeling that it should look like anything, because like you said, with spirituality, it can come from the energy work, or it can come from a more psycho-spiritual, where you're doing a lot more kind of psychological work, but then you can go on the other side where it's like crystals and Palo Santo and ayahuasca and all of these things, and they all sit under the umbrella of spirituality, but they are so different. The people who are very new agey and talk about different things are completely removed from then what I would say is the more open conversation around it, which is more mindfulness, which it seems a little bit, there's an element to it, kind of like an open door into spirituality, the mindfulness. And then people can kind of stay there or get to the point where they want something deeper, and then they choose what direction to go off into. When you were speaking before, I wrote down dilution as a question. I'm like, how am I going to phrase this as a question? But it's like, as we bring spirituality into the more public arena, so more people feel confident about speaking about these things, because I think that sometimes is what people feel kind of stuck in their throat about, because I've been on podcasts where they've been more entrepreneurial minded, you know, because I've been speaking about more the creativity side of the work that I do. But I'm always saying, but the creativity and spirituality are linked. Let me tell you that, you know. But even then, when I've been on those, then it's been the idea of they're going, oh yeah, but you're, you know, woo woo, you know, they'll literally kind of almost introduce me as the woo. Like, I'm definitely not woo. If you think I'm woo woo, you need to come and meet some people I'm probably one of the most grounded people you will ever meet. Like, literally, in terms of like people who I know and what they do, this ain't it. Like, it's like nothing to do with it. But then do we need to dilute it? Do we need to like soften the edges of the language in order to bring it to, so if you know you're speaking to a CEO or any C-suite person who's open to spirituality now, and they are then going to either, you know, integrate it and then translate it into how they bring it to their business and their stuff and their teams. What do you think is necessary? Do you think there's a necessity to dilute the language, or should we just go, you know, up front and with it? Like, what approach are you taking on that?
I think I'm taking the approach I do with every single client, which is, where are they at right now?
Good one.
You know, like with whether you speak the woo-woo speak, right? So say I was working with a client who was already like well along the spiritual path, and we could speak in all the lingo and everything else. I would still be speaking to them where they are at. What are they actually able to receive? Because we could be talking about this in terms of dilution, right? Okay, I'm not going to say a certain word because they're going to reject it, etc. But what you're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is I need to be able to get into this person, right? I need them to understand this. And so I think when we talk about language in terms of diluting language, language itself is already only a symbol. And so if we're keeping the energetic resonance of what it is that we want to create, it doesn't matter what language you put to it, right? But I need to be able to communicate it through the symbol of words, through the symbol of language, in a way that someone is going to understand it and take it on board, right? So yes, maybe there will be diluting in terms of the words. Maybe I won't use the lingo that we use with other people that I would use who already are spiritually minded and who know about these things, right? But the intention is the same. And the idea, the communication of the idea is still the same. It's just that you're making it in a way that someone actually understands that concept, because there's no point saying it in a way where they're not going to understand, right? So it's like, I think people get really, I mean, I even had this when I was thinking about transitioning over, and I was like, I'm going to have to change the way that I speak to people. And I you know, I like to speak about the big concepts and basically there was a massive ego there about, I have studied so much spirituality stuff that I have I've earned the crown to be able to speak the way I speak. Right. And when I like crumbled that away, I was like, oh, well, I'm not really wanting to help anyone, am I? What I want to do is sit on a pedestal, stand on a pedestal and tell you how brilliant I am because of all the amount of spiritual work that I've done by speaking this language that you don't understand, right? That was actually the core of it for me. So I don't believe that the language itself is diluting anything. It's your intention of how you're going in there. And for me, it is the way that I will speak with corporates is always meeting them as to where they're at. That is the only way that you can ever affect change with people, is you have to meet them where they're at. And we learn this from a coaching perspective. We learn this in any kind of change making or communication studies that you do. It's you have to literally speak the same language to get someone on board on your side. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on the diluting of it. Maybe it will be diluted, but the intention will be the same.
It's just something that I'm always thinking about when I'm trying to talk about something, but that's always that's going in my mind. If I change the wording, am I being heard, or am I Am I bringing what's in my mind or what's in my heart or what I'm trying to communicate here, knowing that there might be a real reaction to a word, or there might just not be an understanding of a word because it's not part of the conversation that is being had within a corporate space. But then also similarly within a spirituality space, certain words are not had, or certain words have such a kind of like,
Yeah, like
like,
money.
yeah. The biggest one really, and one of the reasons why um, the spiritual community suffers somewhat, because of this inability to hold the idea that the world that we live in operates this way for now. So then this is the game that we need to play until we figure out a different way of doing things as well. And then also not not demonizing anyone for wanting to have abundance in their life and creating it for whatever reason, for impact, but then also to live an easier life, to not be
Yes,
worrying about the basic, the bottom rung of the hierarchy of needs. It's just like food and shelter.
exactly.
Do we not
Exactly.
just like deal with that first? Because
Yep.
as long as you continue to be concerned about those things, then there's like the work that you do is just always going to be tempered with an element of your needs as opposed to the service that you can do for others, because you're just like worrying about like what you need to do and who you need to meet in terms of like I spoke about your obligations as well.
Perfect.
Um,
Yeah.
Also, what I wanted to maybe ask of you is when it comes to people who have been in the corporate space for a very long time and maybe have felt that they've lost identity because in order to move through the corporate space and become successful within that space, they've made the choice, because I don't think it has to happen, but they've made the choice that they need to kind of strip away at their needs and their perspectives and their point of view in order to fit into the community and the culture of their organization or industry in itself. So are you working with clients like that? And how do you open up the idea that there is a way back to yourself? It's still there, and
Yeah.
all of the stripping away that you have to do because you're exposing yourself to yourself. You're realizing that, okay, I stepped away from who I really am. I'm going to meet resistance. People around me may or may not understand, or may project onto me all of these things. And oftentimes it's not only because they don't want me to move, but it's just they're recognizing something that they're not doing, like it comes from all different ways as well, reasons why people will try and pull you down back to
Yeah.
where you belong, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, how are you working with people who have that? Because I have those conversations, and usually when I'm in the room, they're they're the ones that will have like a real
Gravitate to you.
but a quiet conversation that
Yes.
like don't tell anyone, but I
Yeah.
this has been on my mind for now, and I see how torn they are because they've built a really comfortable life for themselves financially. They've built a reputation for themselves as well that's taken 10, 15 or more years to build, but
Yeah.
then there's this sense of dissatisfaction, or that dream that I had before I entered into this world is still kind of hovering around the sides. And I'm like, my 40s now, my 50s now, can I still do those
Yeah.
things? Or is there a way to do it? And yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Definitely. Those are the people that I'm working with. And um, I think this is what we call the midlife crisis,
Mm, 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 mm.
when people have been working for goals that they thought were important, and maybe it started as you said about the hierarchy of needs. It started with, I need to be safe, I need to be able to afford things, I've got a family now, I need to provide for them, and it started like that, and it was going to be a means to an end, of which then you were going to continue on with doing some of the other stuff that you thought you were going to do with your life, and then you didn't end up there, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the people are caught in that rat race. So it's just like, and then the next step, and then the next step, and the next step. And these changes happen they can happen really subtly,
Mm,
because what happens when you're not aware, when you're not awake, when you're not conscious, you become unconscious. And when every time we do unconscious things and we make unconscious habits, that's when I believe we start to lose ourselves, right? Because every step we've made so far hasn't been a conscious decision necessarily. I know that you said, they decide to, they do, but they do it unconsciously, right? And so it's in the constant unconscious decisions that you've made that you then wake up one day and go, oh, my life sucks. Or I'm deeply dissatisfied. I should be happy because I've got all the things. I've got like this leadership role that I wanted. I'm, top of the company. I've got all the money, the car, the blah, blah, blah. Why am I so sad? Why are things not working out for me? And I would say to those people, if this is something that you're experiencing now, the first thing that you have to have is a deep, firstly, courage to want to do this path. Because there are going to be those things that you just said, Carol. There's going to be pushback. When you decide to change who it is that you are, which is what will happen if you decide to take the path of like reconnecting to yourself and what it is that you actually desire out of the rest of your life, is that the relationships that you have now change. The framework of which people have put you in now changes. Their point of reference changes. For the ego, this is scary for anyone's ego. As soon as a point of reference changes, it's like shaking up the world. And the ego loves for things to be constant. So if you change yourself, everyone around you now has their frame of reference changed. So if it is something that you desire, where you're like, it is time to change my life to something that it actually is going to be fulfilling for the rest of my life, and where I can now be the role model to, whether it's your work colleagues or your family or your friends, to be the role model of someone who actually takes charge of their life, truly takes charge of their life and starts to live a life they actually love, you have to be courageous and you have to be highly dedicated. This is why I kind of have chosen leaders, to be honest, Carol, because I already know they have these traits. They're pretty determined. Like when they decide, they're obviously people who are interested in growth, not talking about personal growth, but they're interested in growth because otherwise they wouldn't have gone for professional growth, right? And they are dedicated to doing that. It's proven by their track record of the fact that they are a leader. And so although this is going to be a scary step for those of you who are thinking about it, I already know that you've got these traits within you. You've done it before, you've done it in your professional life. Now the switch gets to be in your personal and spiritual life. There will be repercussions. There will be repercussions. But I invite you to think about, who do I want to be at the end of my life? What is the legacy that I wish to leave? Do I want to lie on my bed at my very last day and go, oh, I really regret not doing that thing?
Painful.
I personally, I think Carol and I are both like, we're not going to be those people. We're just like living our life, we've lived magical lives already. And this is kind of, I guess, why we're here. We're here to inspire people like you who know that it's time to actually take that step. It's a scary step. And to be honest, it's harder when you get older. It's so much easier to make the step when you're younger, like most things, because we're not so stuck in the ways of which we do things. We're not stuck in the ways we think. We're not stuck in the ways we move. We're not stuck in the ways we act or behave. We tend to make friends or drop friends easily. So our social situations, our social groups can change. And when we get older, we get stuck in the rut and we have the same connections and the same people and the same perspectives and the same thought patterns and the same behaviors. And so it does become harder, but it's not impossible at all. You just have to have the motivation and the courage to take the step to do it.
Yeah. And, and what I was thinking of, just seeing, like envisaging, as you were speaking, like someone who has got like a 30, 40 year career and a reputation built around being one thing, and then has the courage to kind of change and morph into something that is actually bigger and better than before, and the ripple effect that kind of transformation can have. So if you're wanting to make impact, if you make that, then so many people will be watching. Of course, there'll be the whispers and the gossip and the derision and all of the things. But if you can ride past that then it probably make a bigger impact than you probably even envisaged in the first place. I mean, I just always went my way because I just always had that. I just always had that idea that thinking that I could ignore what I wanted to do was a bigger risk than trying it,
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing where I was going to go with things. And it's definitely not been easy, And I've like
Absolutely.
ridden all of the things and had to question every single part of my own self.
Yeah.
But in the long term or in the longer term, it seems like it was kind of the easier thing to do. As hard as it
Yeah.
seemed, it actually was the easier thing to do because I've not built up like a reputation based on me being one thing for decades even,
Mm-hmm.
and then to like pivot on that. So, you know, to anyone who takes that step, then what a transformation that can make, and the
Yeah,
ripple and the amount of people that will be watching and then could make that move forward. It could be like a seismic movement within the
absolutely.
world, right?
Absolutely. And this is like the power that leaders have
Mm,
with that is that any little movement you make is felt and seen. And so
mm,
if you decide to take this courageous step where you're like, oh, it's time to like live a satisfying life and to empower people and, maybe change systems in our business, hint, hint. Because I do believe in systemic change as well, not just personal change. If you have the power, make systemic change as well to make workplaces more humanizing, more empowering for everyone involved. If
right.
you do one little step, it is a huge ripple effect. You have built a reputation that people know you for. There are many eyes looking at you. So make sure that your next step is one that actually changes the world for good.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
what an awesome thing. Even if it's just one little step of you going towards what it is that you want that creates a more happy, joyful person
mm.
who leads, it's going to be seen and it's going to be felt. And
That's it.
I want more leaders who are like that to step up to the plate of doing that. And I think as I said before, I think we're in the right time where that's becoming not only wanted by the leaders themselves, but almost necessary. I think I had the chance to hang out with some 20-year-olds coming into the workplace. I don't often hang out with that age group because I'm nowhere near that age group.
Mm,
But everyone who was heading into their first jobs, a couple of them were graduates from Harvard, and they were going. One of them became a very good friend of mine. He's heading into the IT industry, and he was talking about, oh my gosh, the expectations. What I have to do. I'm not used to it. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with all the things. And what it signaled to me was that we really need to change because these kids, for one, they're not just don't put up with that anymore. They don't put
right.
up with the toxic stuff. They don't. Neither do they sit on their hands and not talk about it. They're coming
Mm,
from a generation that speaks up, a generation of social media, right?
yeah.
Where you can get on social media and you can tell everyone what's going on with your toxic workplace, and that place goes, that thing goes viral. They're not afraid to speak up about it. So I
Mm,
think it's not only the time where people are waking up to the opportunity of living a really fulfilled life and going, hey, maybe I also want to not only do that, but create a positive ripple effect. We
mm,
also have this generation that are pushing us towards that. They're just like, we're not putting up with any more of this toxic stuff that you guys brought in.
mm, 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 mm.
We're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
So here
And
we
and
are.
within that generation as well, some that I speak to, like one, if they once they get over the shock that, there was a life without the internet. Anyway, but it's like some of them are just, especially if they're looking at their parents and the fact that their parents spent, the vast majority of their life working in something that was not necessarily that satisfying for them. And then,
Mm,
are just kind of coming out the other end and then going, okay, oh, I can enjoy my life now. And
mm,
they're like, am I going to have to like walk into a tunnel of like 30 or 40 years of like so work, even
mm,
like wherever they get to as well, and like all from all different backgrounds as well, but just seeing that there's like a mass dissatisfaction with
mm,
people in the workforce and then not really wanting to go anywhere near that, and trying to like find ways of sidestepping that or kind of like shifting, you know, that they're just entering into university or changing their course or coming out and going, do I want to? And then even
Mm,
seeing people come out, I've spoken about this before, but a video that's gone viral on YouTube of a MIT, a guy who went to MIT and then was a surgeon for like a decade or so, and then just went, no, can't do it anymore, walked out,
mhm,
and was filming himself talking about his experience. And I saw it when it was just a few 100,000, and now I think it's at like 8 or 9 million of
wow.
people that have really watched that and have said, yeah, I spent 20 years in this, 30 years in that, you know, high level careers where they
Yeah,
just like, actually, I need something else.
yeah.
And so even within that, there are people that are feeling the pressure and are just popping out. Like the
Yeah.
pandemic kind of opened up a new way of working for many people who realized that they could do effective work from home or they
Mm,
could pivot, you know. So it brought up so many things that period of time.
yeah.
And even I'm writing an article at the moment about authenticity in business and specifically talking about it from point of view like sole traders and small businesses. But
Hmm.
then it was, as I was doing some research on that, the LinkedIn founder was saying in 10 years' time, there's going to be less and less 9 to 5. And there's going to
Yep.
be more people in the gig economy, in
Hmm.
entrepreneurship. So then, like, it's even more important at this point in time to work out who you are and what you stand for, because the marketplace is going to be flooded by people who can do what you do. So what's different
Exactly.
about you? And
Yeah.
you know, so it like all of
Hmm.
this personal development, spiritual development may seem like surplus to requirement, but I think it's more important that you really figure out where you stand and what you're about, because if you're going to be out there with the people whose jobs are disappearing because of AI or just because of the nature of work,
Mm,
what makes you stand out? And if you know yourself and you can then confidently communicate that, again, something that's like highly important now, communication,
yeah.
then you're going to be able to continue to work. So there's so many different things and changes that are happening, whether the corporate structure remains or it like morphs into something else, that
Hmm.
then you're not an employee, but then you're a contractor to that. Like, why would they choose you over everyone else? So there's so many things that are shifting and changing, and why personal work is more and more important. And that's why I can see, okay, this is why I need to stand in that room, because
Hmm.
things are changing. This is why I know that I need to speak about creativity and understanding that energy of creativity and spirituality, and your works too as well.
Yeah.
I think like we're placed at a good time.
Absolutely. And I think just this, this chat on authenticity, I used to do a bit of branding work for a while with
Mhm.
soul-led businesses, but it's it's so interesting watching this come in to leadership like courses. Suddenly we have to be authentic leaders. It's like we've always needed to be authentic leaders. This is nothing new, people. We've always had to be that, like to be a genuine, heartfelt, authentic leader is a good thing. But not
Mm,
only that, like to be authentic to yourself, it always starts with self, right? It's like we can we can fake authenticity. We actually can fake authenticity. Only you know whether that's happening or not.
mm,
But you always have to start with self, and you have to understand what it is that you said, what motivates you, what makes you different. Are you willing to stand in that difference and understand who you are as a person? Do you know what your values are? Just coming back to some of the conversation we had before, it's like people lose their identity. Half of them don't know what they value or enjoy anymore in life, right?
right.
So we need to come back to those cores, and maybe the corporate world will collapse in some way, or the systems have to change in order for businesses to continue to thrive. And as a leader, you get to be the forefront of that. And how do you do that? You tap into who you truly are.
Mm, mm, mm,
You have to go through the work of understanding yourself to then be able to lead effectively in a way that is genuine, that is then attractive to people. I laugh because so much of marketing is about how can you attract your ideal clients, and a lot of it is people want to see people. You see that so much. It's like people want to see the people behind the thing. So we're really talking about attraction marketing through authenticity or through having a face. Same thing is with being a leader or being a business owner, right? It's like they want to see the person. And in order for you to be the person who is then satisfied with the work that you're doing, you have to know yourself.
Mm-mm.
And then you can be that person who then attracts the people who are going to make your life even more fulfilling, and you're going to make their life more fulfilling, and you're going to be only engaging in work that actually lights up your soul. And you're going to be only using systems that light up your soul.
Mm.
So again, like circling back to right at the start when we talked about, strategies and systems, and they're neither good nor bad. It's the same. It's like they're neither good nor bad, and there's not a right one or a wrong one. It just depends what resonates with you. But again, the core thing we have to come back to is discovering self. So you're completely right. It's like, the spiritual and personal development thing that looks like an extra that would be nice to have is not nice to have. It's becoming more and more necessary. And I believe that it's going to be one of the things it is necessary. It'll be one of those like cornerstone things that have to be ticked off or have to be continually worked upon in order to become a leader in the future, because people won't put up with anything less.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. What a way to perfect end to our conversation. Can you let everyone know where they can find you, Nik, please?
You can find me at nikchung.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is the place I kind of hang out the most. You may find me on Insight Timer too. Occasionally I'm there doing some lives and just connecting with my community over there and taking you through some juicy conversations. And we always end with a little bit of a meditation to anchor some of the learnings that we've done. So catch me on any of those platforms.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for today.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nik, for sharing with me, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and also share it with people that you feel will benefit from the wisdom of my guest. To find out more about me, go to my website. It's carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Carol May Whittick, on Facebook under the same name, and Kazmic, Kazmick, on Instagram. So until the next episode, thank you for being here. Have a great week. Speak soon. Take care.